and we can therefore determine through philosophical means what are the constraints that delineate the set of worlds where God always, where God exists at every one of, right? That would be like one way you could understand metaphysical necessity and possibility. But there's a range of different ways people use the term metaphysical possibility, and that's just one of them.
So if James is employing some sort of spiritual law, why would it, and that, especially as it pertains to God, which is not scientifically verifiable or falsifiable, then why would you say that he's talking about something nomological?
I was talking about pigs flying.
No, I'm talking about what James was saying. He was mentioning something about metaphysical as it pertains to God.
No, I was saying that when he was saying that that pigs being unable to fly was logically possible but metaphysically impossible, right? That's just probably a confusion based on not being aware that you can say that pigs flying is nomologically impossible without having to be metaphysically impossible.
So maybe the analogy was that, but he was talking about God initially with JJ.
I'm just confused because something that's not nomologically possible is also not metaphysically possible. So if you say it's not metaphysically possible, nomologically seems to be a subset within the metaphysic category that describes the different possibilities within that. So I don't think that's really wrong.
It's usually understood, right, that there are nomologically impossible worlds that are metaphysically possible worlds.
Can you give me an example?
If you use, so you might think
supernatural miracles.
Well, you might think that it's not nomologically possible to for somebody to go faster than the speed of light, right? But maybe God could have made a world at which people could go faster than the speed of light, right? So that would be a world with a different set of natural laws, and therefore inconsistent with the set of natural laws that hold at this world, which delineate the space of worlds that are nomologically possible, right?
But that also delineates the metaphysical possibility, because that's time, space, matter, the laws of logic, all that stuff is tied to the metaphysics. So if you're just saying that nomological is just a subcategory of that, it seems like if something's not nomologically possible, it can't be metaphysically possible either, unless you can give me a distinction.
What? The idea is, right, that it's up to God which natural laws obtain. And so therefore, there are all kinds of worlds that are metaphysically possible that are not consistent with the natural laws that hold at this world. And therefore, those worlds would be nomologically impossible, the worlds where that God could have created with different natural laws. Those worlds would be nomologically impossible, given nomological possibility is understood as what's consistent with the laws.
But metaphysically possible.
Yeah, they're metaphysically possible.
And how do you distinguish logical possibility from metaphysical possibility? Because it sounds like now you're saying they're the same thing.
No. So the idea is that what worlds are logically possible are worlds that are consistent with the axioms of logic, right? So, for example, most Christians will say that it's logically impossible for God to not exist. There's no contradiction entailed by God not existing. But nonetheless, it's metaphysically impossible for him not to exist, right? Or you might have the view that there's no contradiction entailed by something coming from nothing, or there's no contradiction.
Let me say this back to you in a short sentence and tell me if I'm close. So, logical possibility is things that don't violate the laws of logic. You're saying that metaphysical possibility would be like God's existence. It would be impossible for God to exist. And then nomological is the set of worlds that can come from God's existence.
No, nomological is the set of worlds consistent with natural law, meaning kinds of laws that are studied or framed by the natural sciences. So things like laws of physics, laws of chemistry, and so on. Whatever is consistent with those laws will be nomologically possible.
So natural laws is what is nomologically possible, and then
sometimes it's even called natural necessity as opposed to nomological necessity.
And then you have God that is metaphysically necessary, but you would say that he's not logically necessary because there's not an X and not X there. So that would be kind of how you're
most Christian philosophers would not say that God is logically necessary, and most of them will say that he is metaphysically necessary.
Okay.
But
No,
there's some interesting exceptions. But yeah, that's the general view.
Yeah, I think I'm getting the distinction better. I'm writing that down so then I can go and read something on it, or I'll reach out to Jake and have him send me a paper on it.
But this idea of feasibility, I mean, that is usually interpreted as some kind of metaphysical possibility. And so I think Dog was correct that when Plantinga and Craig say that it's logically possible for God to, actualize a world where, JJ does not commit a sin in circumstance A, and Jerry does not commit a sin at circumstance B. It's logically possible for God to create such a world, but it's metaphysically impossible for him to do so. They're adopting a different view from the historically, common view that God can actualize any world that is logically consistent with his existence, I guess, because obviously God.
So it's my view that's not metaphysically possible. Are you saying that's a modern view?
You don't even know what it means.
What I'm saying is, right, the traditional view has been that God can actualize any world that's logically possible. Now, it's a little tricky because that can't strictly be the view if you think that God is not logically necessary, right? So it has to be something like any world that's any of the worlds that are logically possible that God exists at, right? Because God
can actualize a world where he's a liar, Jack? Because that's logically possible?
No, because the idea is if you think it's an essential property of God that he's not a liar, then he couldn't actualize a world where he's not a liar, because then he wouldn't be God, right? So we're talking
about a metaphysical consideration?
Well,
because you were talking about God not existing as well.
Yeah, but God wouldn't exist at a world where he was a liar if his being not a liar is an essential property.
No. What you said earlier was that most philosophers would agree that it's logically possible for God not to exist, is what you said.
Yeah, and what I'm saying is that God would not exist at a world where he was a liar, because that would contradict an essential property of God that he not be a liar.
Isn't that what Stephen Law argues, that it is logically possible?
Well, I think what Stephen Law is saying is that if you think that you don't have access to God's reasons, God could actually have reasons for you to be deceived, but you might understand God being able to have you be deceived as being consistent with him not being a liar.
I thought the understanding was that God could, as an evil God, as one who is a liar, be deceiving.
Oh, you're talking about the evil God challenge. No, in the evil God challenge, he's understanding God in a broader way, where it's not an essential property of being a God that God not be a liar. But that kind of God, it's also not an essential property that he be perfectly good. So he's just understanding God as like some
right, but he's claiming that's logically possible, is my point.
Yeah, but most Christians would agree that it's logically possible for an evil God. That's what I said.
It's logically possible for God to be evil or liar, is what I originally said.
Yeah, but that's just there's just two different concepts of God at play there, right?
He wouldn't be the Christian God, John. He'd just be a different God that could be lying.
Yeah, that's right.
Does not compute.
So given the additional premises of the attributes of the Christian God, well, then that's not logically possible, is what you guys are saying. I
don't know. What is it you think I'm saying is not logically possible? You mean that God is a liar?
Yeah, but you're taking into consideration other premises.
If God is defined as a being that cannot lie, right, then it's logically impossible for God to be a liar. It's just that.
Yeah, well, if God is defined as one who exists, then it's not logically possible for God not to exist.
Well, it's a little bit.
Well, then you're just a necessitarian.
That's going to get into a set of like complicated issues.
That's right.
If you want to talk about the ontological argument, that's sort of like a whole other topic.
I'm just saying that in order to create a sort of a contradiction, you had to add additional premises.
No, it was about definition.
Are you a necessitarian again, John? Is that what's happening there?
Yeah, I decline to answer your question.
I think
That's what I
John.
thought.
I don't think
That's right.
John is fully committed to a view on this. I think he thinks some views seem more plausible than others.
Yeah, but he
But
doesn't
like
want to
I
say,
said, I am
he doesn't
somewhat
want to say that
open
it's
to
necessary.
Necessitarianism
I think he
myself.
wants to be JJ, but he's afraid.
He
I
doesn't.
think that's what's
He
happening.
doesn't want to deal with the implications.
Quasi necessitarian. Once God has
Yes.
decided to create, then everything else after that, he's a necessarian.
I think there are
necessarian about.
certainly costs.
Well,
if
no, we're
you
talking about
accept
the actual
Necessitarianism.
necessity of God himself, Haiti.
Oh,
That-
okay.
Yeah, that
He
part.
doesn't know if God's necessary?
That's right.
Well, he
I
wants.
thought he said he was metaphysically necessary, but not logically necessary.
That's kind of what we were talking about.
I mean,
But
no one knows
nothing-
what that means.
God is necessary, but everything that God creates, by definition, is contingent. It doesn't have a say.
It's not
It
John's
depends on
view.
something else.
A satiety.
I think John
We're
would
talking about God's logicalness, that like that his existence is logically necessary, James. I don't think you
Yes,
want to say.
I
I
think
don't think you
John.
want to say that he's logically necessary.
If it depends on how you're defining God. If you define God as the necessary being, then he has to definitionally be logically necessary.
Right, I was
Really?
asking
By the
what
way,
you.
I thought it was metaphysically necessary.
By the way, I just want to update you on some server news. Matt's in the other room with Banshee, and Matt's agreed that we're all going to lose our public figure roles. And Matt, I guess, spoke to you
Yay.
too when he said that was okay. I don't know if he asked you or not, but we're all losing our public figure roles.
Well, I really don't care because I never asked for it to begin with.
Fair enough.
You don't deserve it.
Yeah, I usually like respond to the mods and I let you guys change the subject. So I would not be okay losing my public figure role.
Well, you just lost
No.
it because Matt said it was
That
okay to
deserve-
Banshee.
Is that
I
an
could've called
objective set? Deserving an objective sense?
That'd be a deal breaker.
Whatever, bye.
You better go in there and talk to Banshee before he takes it away from you. Yeah. Uh-oh. Trouble in paradise. Matt's really good at just deciding things for other people, isn't he?
He's very good at that.
Jane, do you want to accurately replicate the question that was posed about God's actions?
Sure, it was whether or not God can create a world where all free agents choose the good. It was just that,
Right.
yeah. And he said it's logically possible, but not feasible.
So how do we apply this feasibility to that question?
Metaphysics.
What do you mean?
Metaphysical modality. How many times do you have to ask this stupid question, JJ? It's explained to you about 7 or 8 times. By
So
James
there's
and
something-
Converse.
There's something about time, space, and matter that constrains God's ability to create beings that only do.
It's not
Good.
about. It's not really about time, space, and matter.
He's just trying to lie, is all, Jack. Trying
Well,
to pretend.
I'm just using James's words. Maybe you could clear it up for me, John.
Yeah, so when he used time, space, and matter, he was just because he made utterances about time, space, and matter does not mean, because what he said to you was that if you're talking about logical possibility, then I already answered your question in terms of it is logically possible, but not metaphysically feasible, is what he was trying to say. And metaphysically, not talking about nomological, as Jack was explained.
So you think he meant nomological?
Again, there's no reason to think that time, space, and matter is expressed by James as it pertains to nomological concerns is talking about the metaphysical modality in contrast to logical modality.
So there's some metaphysical constraint that makes it not feasible?
So you're trying to take bits and pieces of what James has said, and you've been doing the Jane does this the same thing too, and so does JoVon. You guys take certain statements, act stupid, and try to tie them together when they're not even mentioned in the same context.
The question was real simple.
Yeah, the question, as Concrete already exposed, is that you decided to talk about feasibility as it pertains to God
No.
when Concrete was not even mentioning that. He already explained that to you as well.
Well, that's completely incorrect. It was Concrete that brought up this idea of feasibility.
Concrete already explained to you, did you know he was not talking about as it pertains to God?
But the question posed to Concrete was, is it possible for God to create a world of free agents where they always choose the good? And so that's directly asking him about God's capabilities and actions. And his response was, it's logically possible, but not feasible. Meaning for God.
Okay, meaning what?
That's
For
what I
God,
asked him.
not
That's
creatures.
what I asked him.
Creatures
What
are
do you
creating a
mean?
God or creating a
What
world
do you-
where free
I
agents
asked
can
him-
choose the good. God is.
Jane, yeah, obviously it was about God, and I asked him what he meant by feasible. And he didn't want to answer, so I Googled it. I said, well, do you mean possible? Do you mean probable? Because I don't think he had any idea what he meant by it. He just didn't want to say. And then that's when Albedo and Converse piped up with this idea of feasibility as proposed by Craig and apparently Plantinga. And now we've talked about whether or not
Well, you obviously still have a problem with the understanding after Albedo
Well, because
is an expression
their
converse.
definition and explanation was about creatures and what
None of which
creatures can do
applied.
feasibly, which is not. I'm assuming you don't want to apply what creatures can do to what God can do, right?
I already went over this with Converse several times.
So we don't understand what feasible is doing in Concrete's answer as pertaining to God's actions, creating free will agents that only do the
Yeah, that
good.
was already explained by James.
No, it wasn't. It wasn't explained by James.
James said there was something about time, space, and matter that constrained God's actions. And then he talked to Jack about whether or not he really meant nomological. But it's still unclear whether or not that's what he meant.
This is incredible. This
JJ,
is
you
why
want
you
Brigham
guys
to be minor?
behave on. My wife is also a Roman Catholic, or Roman Catholic also. This is what you guys do. You guys focus on some sort of gotcha utterances that are just mainly fabricated and manufactured.
No, we're just looking for an answer to the question. He asked
why
a
do you think
question
it's
about
just
whether or
like,
not
just
it's
like
possible
you, Jane. Just
for
like
God
you,
to
Jane.
create a world of free will agents that only choose the good. We
Just
didn't
like
understand the
you
answer because he used the word
misrepresented
I've
me.
never heard. I've never heard
corrected-
anyone use the word feasible as pertaining to God's actions. And so we
Just like
asked
how
him
you lied.
to figure out to define that word in that sense.
My
Someone's
wife is
echoing.
a Roman Catholic. So earlier, JJ made a misrepresentation about my statement. Kept repeating it and repeating it and repeating it to the point where he got Haiti to repeat that. I corrected her as well and told her
What?
that
What?
JJ misrepresented. Then you repeated
I don't know
it.
what you're talking about. What was the thing I repeated?
What JJ repeated.
Which was what? I don't remember this. Maybe I'll agree, but I just don't know what you're talking about. You just mentioned that I repeated something that was false. What was it?
How can JJ repeat something that he was the original utterance?
I corrected him
himself a
about
lot.
6 or 7 times, actually.
What misrepresentation are you referring to?
Yeah, what was it? Because you said I said it too. You did this yesterday, where you said they said blah blah, blah blah blah. This is what subjectivism is. And when asked who these people were, all you could say was, "It happens more often than not." All these people say it, but you'd never say
you guys
who.
want to argue about nothing. Like you said this.
No.
What do
You
you
brought
mean by
this up,
that?
John. This
This
was
is all
your
you guys have.
objection. This
You
was
never
your
argue
objection.
any. You ever listen,
John,
honey?
this
You
was
never
your
put out a
objection.
position.
You just
You
brought it
never
up
put out a
as an
position.
example of look at
See,
you guys always
now you're
misrepresenting
overtalking.
me.
John is very
You
triggered.
interrupt. You
I'm
repeat
triggered?
things that aren't true. You repeat things that aren't
Listen to this
true,
woman.
and then you gave a specific example that JJ uttered something that was incorrect, and then Haiti repeated it, and then I repeated it. But you can't give us what the utterance was. What was it?
You want to jump on that too, JJ? I notice you get emotional just like this woman.
His attempts are so
Go
pathetic.
on, guy. I'm giving you the
What was-
opportunity.
Yeah, what was
if you
the
want to go,
misrepresentation?
I don't understand why. If you're going
I'll
to
give you a
snivel about
platform.
it,
There you go, Jane. Go for it.
What was
if
the
you're going to
misrepresentation
snivel
you're talking about?
about a misrepresentation,
Oh, that
you
was
should
a
at
little
least
weak. You have
remember
to
what
say
it
it with
is.
emphasis, JJ. Come on.
Uh-huh.
You have to say, what was that? What was this thing I said? What?
Yeah, I'm
Look,
ready.
if you want to retract, John, if you want to retract it and
Of
say
course
we
I do
didn't
not.
misrepresent,
I
okay,
don't
then
care.
you need to tell
I
us
don't
what we
care.
misrepresented
I
you
don't need
in.
to tell you diddly.
Okay, then you need to retract it then.
Because
No,
I'm not going to get
just let
into
him-
this debate.
Just let him
About
continue with
whether-
the bullshit.
Yeah. Yeah.
What do we expect
not-
by now?
I'm not interested in then telling you, and then you guys want to discuss it for the next 2 hours on whether.
Yeah, well, I mean,
whether
just keep
it's this or
bullshitting.
that.
Keep avoiding the pit of incoherence that you're in, and continue to bullshit. I mean,
Allegations of incoherence.
I feel like I'm self-harming myself right now.
it's clear to people with working brains.
This is all you
The
guys
issue
have.
is he doesn't want to repeat it.
JJ, do
JJ,
not
he doesn't
defend
want to.
your
I'm not talking to
pantheism.
you, John. JJ, he doesn't want to repeat
Jane,
it.
do not
John,
defend. Well,
I'm not
we don't
talking
even
to
know if you're agnostic or atheist or whatever.
Me?
After
Doesn't
2
know what he's
years.
talking about.
We don't know.
John doesn't know himself what he's
No,
referring to.
JJ, the issue is he doesn't want to repeat it because he knows that we'll find the recording of him saying it, and then he can't claim that we misrepresented what he said when we literally repeated it.
My meaning is irrelevant to my
hypothesis.
questions.
Yeah, it's a pattern of him avoiding scrutiny.
Yeah, you guys are the ones with the pattern. You guys are constantly like you guys are like snakes in the grass looking for someone to just bite, and you guys are slithering around just waiting. Sometimes you sit there for 2 hours like Jane does, and then she tries to pounce on someone when she thinks she has something. That's all she ever does. She's good for nothing. Absolutely nothing. Worthless.
Says the person that won't answer any questions, but okay.
Why are you here, John?